Hello and welcome to Mabinda TV. So for now, I would like to look at a few top issues. So number one, I'm looking at more companies are closing down in Kenya. What does that mean? Then Uhuru to Gen Zs, you must fight for your rights. And then of course, Ruto targets 13.4 trillion shillings of taxes in his first term, and then in Africa perspectives, what does Trump's second term mean for Africa? What does Trump's second term mean for Africa? And then H1B Visa controversy. Who will be affected by US policy changes? That is, who will be affected by US policy visa changes? And then in another that is in education allow villages to offer upgrade programs. So Uhuru to Gen Zs, you must fight for your rights. So what does President Uhuru mean to Gen Zs when he says you must fight for your rights? I think right now is the time to ask what really was the Gen Z revolution about? Was it about better governance? Was it about better opportunities for young people? I think it was just an acknowledgement that the country is headed in the wrong direction. And so basically, you had the Gen Z movement come along and then basically try and pressure the Ruto regime that basically we are not happy with the direction of the country. I think that was it about the Gen Z movement, that you are not happy about the direction of the country, and that was what it was about. But then, of course, the movement got scattered. Of course, some have said you cannot have a tribeless, a leaderless movement, and then the Gen Z and now needs a leader. Of course, I think it has emerged that Morara Kebaso is maybe the leader of the Gen Z movement. Of course, Morara Kebaso has said he will stand for the presidency in 2027. Of course, his vampire diaries that he is going around the country exposing projects that are non-existent, that were allocated millions, billions of shillings, but are now non-existent. That is Morara Kebas. Of course, you heard him tell us that someone from his fellow Kisi community telephoned him that he should leave the seat for Fred Matiang'i. So you can see how very much that is tribalism is affecting our politics. Someone comes along and tells Morara Kebaso that don't go for the presidency, instead leave it to Fred Matiang'i. So basically, what was the revolution about? It is that Kenya is a deferred project. Kenyan miracle story is a deferred dream. That's what it is about. So on the one hand, Kenya celebrates that it is not Somalia. When we are demanding for accountability, they say that when we are demanding for accountability, they compare Kenya to Sudan. They say you could turn like Sudan, you could turn like Somalia. Yes, even if Ruto is not a good leader, but at least he is making the country stable. But then when they tax us, they compare Kenya to Singapore. They say we want Kenya to be a first world country in which there will be a fast-paced development. And I think right now Kenya has to the Gen Zs have to continue fighting for their rights. So look at the companies leaving the country. Basically, they are leaving the country because of the high cost of doing business in the country, because of corruption. That's why these companies are leaving the country. Why? They are being overtaxed. When you start a business in Kenya, they see that as an opportunity. I think the a taxman sees that as an opportunity to tax you to death, and this is why it is not advisable for Kenyans to just free for the taxman to tax our businesses in that way. They say the purpose of government is to create an enabling environment. That's what the purpose of the government is, to create an enabling environment so that business can create the right kind of jobs. But that is not happening. This is why I say that basically right now Kenyans need to be able to gang up. We are not creating the right conditions for investors because we overtax them. We make it very hard for them to do business. We demand for money from them. We demand for corrupt money. And that's why Kenya is not very soon. Tanzania and Uganda are going to reach the levels of the Kenyan economy because of the bad corruption. Look at the port of Mombasa. It is not doing as well as the port of Dar es Salaam or port of Dar es Salaam, basically because the goods are being and I think even Uganda and Rwanda and Burundi are using some of the imports. They are using the port of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So basically, we are losing out. Kenya used to be the giant economy in Eastern Central Africa. Well, that is going to be affected because our businesses are taxed so much. So I think I look at the number of Form 4 graduates that got grade C plus and above. It was about 246,000 students got grade C plus and above. So that means all these 246,000 students are going to go to universities. But do we have opportunities for them? Do we have opportunities for these people? So this is why I say Kenya is a deferred dream. The miracle story of Kenya is always a deferred one. We always kill, and people that come that offer us ideas, the grand ideas to be able to lift Kenya forward, they usually kill. Look at Tom Mboya, look at Pio Gama Pinto, look at Robert Ouko, look at J.M. Karaoke, who famously said that Kenya is a country of 10 millionaires and 10 million beggars. So basically, I think we kill our prophets. So basically, the Gen Z movement, I'm not saying that Uhuru was the yardstick of development. He had his own corruption issues in that country, maybe the Eurobond scandal, but I think it is good that the Gen Zs fight for their rights so that then they can steer the country forward. It is just that is just it. The Gen Zs need to fight for their rights so that they can enable the country to move forward. And I think if the country moves forward, then I think we will have a country that creates the right opportunities. I think we keep kicking the can of development down the road. That's just it. We keep kicking the can of development and down the road. Look at tap water. Tap water in every African home should have been gotten in 1980. We should have had tap water in every African home in 1980. But these leaders then they are not one of us. What do? When they are campaigning for office, they invoke the name of our ancestors to think so that we think they are one of us. They invoke the spirits of our ancestors. But then when they are in office, they become full Europeans always taking projects abroad. They never think of the local people. So when they are campaigning for office, they invoke the spirits of our ancestors. They invoke the spirits of Londa Magere. They invoke the spirits of Koetalela Arab Samoa. They invoke the spirits of Wango Maderi. They invoke the spirits of Wayaki Wahinga, of Koinange, of all those great ancestors of us. But then when they are in office, they basically siphon away our wealth. This is why I say African countries did not get independence at all. African countries did not get independence. We were not gifted independence. What the colonialists did, they saw that the running of the colonies was getting more expensive. So what did they do? They placed figureheads. They placed figureheads. They placed puppets as our president, so that they could develop Africa just enough so that resources freely flow to Western capitals, but not by much to be able to determine our self destiny. So basically, I think that is the message that I think we are headed in the wrong direction, and I don't think it is something that we should be playing over. So basically, right now, you will have basically right now I think we will be having a country that is not going in the right direction, and I think Kenya is among the countries that was looked at in very good terms. Look at when the opposition won the election in 2002. You had ministers openly sweeping the streets. You had citizens openly arresting corrupt officers. You had citizens openly arresting corrupt police officers. I think the conservative news magazine, The Economist, had a screaming headline that Kenya, a beacon of hope for Africa. That's when the opposition won the election in 2002. But then I think Kibaki developed the country now. But then I think that was only for 5 years before the post-election violence of 2007. So I think right now I just think that Kenya is headed in the wrong direction, and I think we need to have this movement of the Gen Zs now that it has started. Now, the next logical step should be to step out of social media, take the identity cards, take the voters cards, register to vote, and then from that we should contribute to our candidates. Look at the United States. When a candidate wants to stand for elections, what do? Organize they fundraise for them, but here we ask for funds from our candidates. That's the whole problem. So when they go to office, the first order of business is to replenish their kitty. So basically what we need to be doing is to contribute to our campaign candidates, and when the likes of Morara Kebaso maybe ask for votes, we should be able to ask for campaign money. We should not deride them as poor. We should be able to contribute to them so that then they can we can raise the money. And I think really what we need is a movement, not really a revolution, because for a revolution you can't simply scatter a revolution when you chop off the head of the revolutionary. But a movement is fed from the ground up. It can adapt, it can change, it can move, it can mutate, but because it is fed from the ground up, it is fed from a million inflection points. So that's why we need a movement of these changes, and of course, the generation Alpha is also going to join this movement. So basically, we need a movement basically right now. And then, of course, another story that President Ruto targets 13.4 trillion shillings in his first term. So what that 13.4 trillion shillings, I think it's just a lot of money, 13.4 trillion shillings. But what has those taxes done for economy? What has these trillions in taxes done for economy? That's what we should be doing. If we had services, then we would not be complaining about being overtaxed. If we had services, we will not be complaining of being overtaxed. But you are being overtaxed. There are no salaries. You are being overtaxed, and there is no consistent service delivery. If a country such as in the Scandinavian, the likes of Denmark, the likes of Finland, the likes of Sweden, the likes of Norway, they are overtaxed, but they have services to show for it. For instance, everyone gets to free education up to university. In fact, you can enroll in university at whatever age you want because it is free. So basically, I think that we need to be able to have a say in we need to have commensurate services along with these taxes, but these taxes are being stolen. When you have a cabinet that you have a cabinet where the average net worth is about 400 million shillings, then you wonder why are you looking for a job in the first place when your net worth is already 400 billion shillings? Why are you looking for a job in the first place when your net worth is 4 billion shillings? What are you going to what job are you going to look for, except maybe it is to protect your money, which most of the times is ill-gotten wealth, and then of course it is to steal some more money because you are going to be looking after a ministry, after a budget, and of course that means you will be deciding where these funds go. So when you give out a tender, then you will going to demand that you be given maybe some percentage of that money, and that is why these people are seeking for election. And I think when you account for corruption outflows from Africa, then Africa is a net donor to the world. It is not a net recipient in aid. So basically, I think we are headed in the wrong direction, and I don't think it should be something that we should really I don't think it should be something that we should really be thinking much about, because we are basically we are headed in the wrong direction. People are stealing public money, and what happens to the corrupt in Japan? The corrupt in Japan are they commit suicide because of the shame they have caused society. In China, what happens to the corrupt in China? The corrupt in China are shot by the firing squad because the conviction rates are about 99% and you cannot be stealing public money in China. What happens to the corrupt in Euro America? The corrupt in Euro America, they are the corrupt in Euro America. They resign as they wait for the long arm of the law to catch up with them. But what happens to the corrupt in Kenya? The corrupt in Kenya, the corrupt in Africa, basically we celebrate them and we re-elect them back to office because they may be corrupt, but they are one of us. That's what we say. They may be corrupt, but they are one of us, and that's why then this country continues to punch low. This is why this continent continues to punch low because people take our public money, and it will be forgivable if they maybe choose to invest that money in Africa. But no, they take it to Dubai, they take it to Switzerland, they take it to Jersey and Guernsey Islands, they take it to save tax havens in some faraway countries, and that's why then Africa miracle story becomes a deferred dream. So basically, that is why we need to be able to fight against corruption. Corruption kills us, and basically what we should be doing is to ensure that we have tough anti-corruption laws. If you are still, we just need a 2 or 3 conviction of high profile corrupt individuals in the country. We just need 2 or 3 to set an example, so that then if you still and we have a person of the profile of a deputy president or even the president or cabinet secretary caught stealing money, then we jail them, then people will be, we give them a death sentence, then people will be persuaded. But now you have individuals that are boasting, I joined the government, now you can see my children are attending international schools, are attending, they have, when they get sick, they go to be treated in hospitals abroad. Look at the governor of Nakuru, Susan Kihika. She has gone to deliver in a hospital in the US. So she is overseeing over the county hospitals, but she deems them that they are beneath, those hospitals are beneath her. So what kind of message is she sending to her constituents? What kind of message is Susan Kihika sending to her constituents when she is overseeing a county hospital, but then she cannot deliver in that hospital? She goes to deliver in the US. So basically, I think that we have really forgiven corruption that much, and that is why we need the end of corruption. So that needs to end, and then of course. And then in Africa perspectives, what does the term second term mean for Africa? In Africa perspectives, what does the term second term mean for Africa? I just think that the term second term is going to offer, basically Africa has to stand on its own. America is going to be a solutionist. So basically it is going to withdraw from the world, and of course they say America has already withdrawn from the World Health Organization. WHO has withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement. Basically, America has withdrawn from all those things, and basically it is isolating itself. So basically, that is what America is doing. So basically, how then can Africa stay itself during the Trump era? The aid is going to reduce. So traditionally, Africa is a footnote in America's foreign policy. That is, Africa is a footnote in America's foreign policy. So Africa is only looked as an aid and a humanitarian hotspot. That's just the fact. The fact is that Africa is looked as an aid and humanitarian hotspot. It's not looked as a trade and investment destination, and that's why we need to be worried that Africa is not a trade and investment destination. It is basically an aid and humanitarian hotspot. So that means that when we Africa, when we are looked at a place that is a common cold away from a disease pandemic, a warlord away from civil war, and a warlord away from civil war, and of course a common cold away from a disease pandemic, and of course a spoonful away from starvation. So that's how Africa is looked at, but then we have to steer Africa away from that direction. Africa produces much of the mineral resources that the rest of the world uses, so why is it that we are the poorest continent? Let's fix our leadership, but also let's acknowledge some of the factors for Africa's development are externally generated. We need fair trade rules. We need to value add our mineral resources, so that instead of exporting copper, we are exporting electronics. Instead of exporting gold and diamond, we are exporting jewelry. Instead of exporting coltan, we are exporting mobile phones and computers. Instead of exporting uranium, we are exporting nuclear power. Instead of exporting coffee beans, we are exporting coffee drinking chains. Instead of exporting cotton, we are exporting designer clothes. That's how. Instead of exporting titanium, we should be exporting aircraft parts. Instead of exporting timber, we are exporting papers. That's how the African economy should be structured, but that is not the case. The case is that we are creating an Africa that only exports raw materials, and that's why the rest of the world really rips off Africa. So basically, Donald Trump does not give much of a hula baloo about Africa. He does sometimes maybe even borders on racism against black people. Of course, he has said, I think he has called African countries shitholes. He thinks immigrants that are coming from shithole countries in Africa, he thinks immigrants that are coming from Africa are from prison and mental institutions. He does not know that in some of those companies you have black people working in those companies. Of course, he has called Africa in very unpalatable terms, and in fact, one of the reasons why Donald Trump ran for office is how dare America elect a black president in Barack Obama. That is one of the reasons why Donald Trump ran for office. Is how dare America elect a black president in Obama. So you can see even the reason why Michelle Obama refused to attend the Trump inauguration. She said that she can't be fake. She can't suddenly reach out to Donald Trump when Donald Trump has used very unpalatable terms to minorities. So basically, it is going to be that Donald Trump has used very uncharacteristic terms towards black people. Of course, and they have some kind of a superiority complex. But remember, America was founded by the forced enslavement of black people and the near extermination of Native Americans. So that should always be the mind. So basically, whereas America has been welcoming of immigrants from all around the world, whereas immigrants have constantly renewed America, but that America was purposely built to be a European satellite state. That's how it has always been. Whereas America has always been welcoming of immigrants from around the world, was immigrants constantly renew America, but that America has always been welcoming, but that America was purposely built to be a European satellite state. So that's how America is going to function. So basically, you let me know on what you think of Donald Trump. You let me know on what you think of Donald Trump second term. What do you think it means for Africa? So, what do you think it means for Africa? And is it a good thing for Africa? That is Trump's second term. Is it a good thing for Africa? And so, of course, then in ideas, there will be a controversy about the H1B visa. So, the H1B visa is how immigrants get to live and work in America. So, H1B visa is what allows the skilled immigrants to be able to work in America. So, of course, some conservatives think it is very much abuse, but America cannot have its cake and eat it. So basically, they say the H1B visa, these skilled immigrants are taken in very cheaply, and then they are used basically. They are taking skilled immigrants very cheaply. Then they use it to undercut American workers. So they say, where's American companies have been the most undercut by globalization, whereas American companies have benefited the most from globalization, but that it is American companies that American workers that have been the most undercut by globalization. So, what does it mean for Donald Trump's second term for Africa? I just think it will be business as usual. I just think Africa has to look inwards. We need to look to the West with its 500-year subjugation of black people. No, do we need to look to China with its depth of diplomacy? Africa has enough. Look at DR Congo. The mineral waste potential of DR Congo is about $30 trillion. That's the mineral waste potential of DR Congo. It is worth $30 trillion. But then so now you can imagine the mineral potential of Africa. It could be anywhere $400 trillion, $500 trillion. That's how much wealth Africa is sitting on. We could be the biggest economy in the world if we just took on. We could be the biggest economy in the world if we just took on. We had better leaders, if we value added, if we trained our citizens, if we trained our people on that is a creativity and innovation, so that they will create world-beating companies. We could create a magic and wonder of the world. We could return to the golden age of Egypt, where the rest of the world worshipped at our feet. They were inspired by Egypt. So basically, that for the past 700 years, Africa has been black people have been a laughing stock for the world. For the last 700 years, black people have been a laughing stock for the world, but that needs to end. It cannot continue to be so for so long. So that's why it needs to end. Africa has to put its house in order so that then it can become that shining city on the hill, so that we can reclaim our fortunes. But then Africans are so divided. Let's fix our politics. So the bad thing is that a leader in Africa, either they are a populist, they identify with the peasant, they identify with the peasant, but have no economic means, so they don't economically uplift their people, or basically, secondly, or maybe they are systems technocrats with all the solutions for African problems, with the brains to have all the solutions to African problems, but they then don't undertake it because they with all the solutions to African problems, but they don't undertake it because then because they cannot be elected by the peasant, because they don't emotionally connect to the peasant. Or maybe an African could also be maybe the opposite polarity kind of a leader. This is the leader that Africa needs, has the mien of a village peasant, but has the brains of a Wall Street power broker, treats the king and the peasant quite the same way, but then they are not able to, they don't reach the big stage. They are usually killed. So that's it for now. Or when you think about it, and then in ideas, what do you think about Uber drivers? So should Uber drivers be drivers, or should be employees or subcontractors? Do you think this is an idea? In ideas, I'm asking, should Uber drivers be employees or subcontractors for state governments, for labor enforcers, for human resource professionals? They think that Uber drivers should be employees with all the benefits to an employee, maybe a stable salary, a standing salary each every end of the month, and maybe should be able to have maybe a vacation, should be able to have some sorts of allowances. Basically, because they have restrictions to their jobs, and so are entitled to those things. But then, of course, someone else will argue, no, Uber drivers are in fact subcontractors. That the Uber app is merely a connecting app between the driver and the commuter, and that they must, other than the commissions they get, then basically they are not mandated to be anything else other than get their commission. So that's the long running debate that still is something that comes up across the world. There are over 1 million Uber drivers. So if they become employees, then can Uber afford to pay them a standing salary, all of them? So basically, that's what it means. And of course, a lot of parents don't like it when their kids are Uber drivers. They think it is not a good enough. They think it is not a good enough kind of job. They don't think it is a well-paying job at all. So basically, then they think that this is not just the job for my son. So I think Uber drivers then should be maybe somewhere in between an employee and a subcontractor. So I think as a platform-based economy, the employee where freelancing, subcontracting, that is freelancing, subcontracting, gig working are merging, and basically this is the new form of working where freelancing, subcontracting, gig working are merging, and of course, maybe this is going to overthrow the traditional relationship between an employer and employee. So, what do you think about Uber drivers? Do they should they be that is, should Uber drivers be employees or should they be subcontractors? You let me know in the comment section on what you think of that. So bye for now, till the next time. Bye for now.